Some people seem to exist in constant friction. Every conversation is a spark, every difference amplified. Arguments are frequent, empathy rare, and understanding elusive. To watch them is to witness a storm contained in human form, energy and resistance intertwined. This pattern is not born of malice alone. It arises from deeply ingrained cognitive habits, emotional responses, and sometimes unresolved wounds. Their need to assert, defend, or control shapes the way they engage with others. Understanding these individuals is not about assigning blame. It is about exploring the architecture of thought, emotion, and perception that makes persistent argumentation a defining feature of their psychological life. This story is of friction, defense, and the human mind navigating difference, misunderstanding, and the persistent urge to be right. To encounter someone who always argues is to feel the energy of resistance before a word is even spoken. Conversations are charged, gestures amplified, and meanings scrutinized. They inhabit a world where difference is tension, opinion is territory, and every exchange is a subtle battlefield. The spark of conflict seems constant, a rhythm of interaction that is both exhausting and magnetic. These individuals are rarely idle observers. They engage fully, insistently, and sometimes insist on being understood before listening to understand. Their perspective is vivid, immovable, and defended with subtle or overt intensity. Even casual disagreements become arenas for assertion, as if every point unchallenged risks eroding their sense of self or control. Underlying this pattern is a perception of the world as uncertain, complex, and potentially threatening. Disagreement is not merely difference, it is risk of being wrong, overlooked, misunderstood, or diminished. Arguments function as a shield, a way to claim stability in a landscape that feels unpredictable. Relationally, the pattern is visible. Family, friends, colleagues, and strangers often report tension, frustration, or exhaustion in interactions. Yet the argumentative individual may experience frustration themselves. Others do not see the truth. As they do, their perspective unacknowledged, their reasoning dismissed. Misunderstanding is both the cause and consequence of the spark. They push, resist, and defend in cycles that perpetuate conflict. Emotion fuels behavior. Anger, impatience, or irritation are often layered over anxiety, fear, or insecurity. Every disagreement is imbued with the energy of self-protection, even when expressed as intellectual or moral conviction. Their insistence is less about winning and more about asserting presence, maintaining autonomy, or safeguarding values. Cognitive habits shape perception. They notice contradictions, inconsistencies, or ambiguities in others' statements with acute attention. Small deviations from logic, expectation, or principle may trigger responses that escalate into argument. The mind becomes a lens focused on error, oversight, or disagreement, magnifying minor differences into larger friction points. Yet there is a subtle intelligence at work. Those who always argue are often deeply observant, analytical, and quick to perceive relational and logical nuance. The very pattern that challenges others is rooted in acute awareness. They read, evaluate, and respond with precision. It is a strength shaped by tension, honed by the need to navigate a world that feels unpredictable or threatening. Living with this spark is complex, for them and for those around them. It creates friction and energy, insight and isolation, connection and conflict. Their life becomes a series of relational and cognitive negotiations, a constant balancing act between asserting perspective and encountering difference. The persistent spark is more than a habit, it is architecture. It reflects perception, adaptation, and emotional rhythm, a dance of defense, attention, and engagement. And to understand it is not to excuse it, but to recognize the subtle interplay of mind, emotion, and circumstance that fuels the relentless energy of argument. The roots of persistent argument often reach deep into early life. Some grow up in households where voices were loud, emotions volatile, or boundaries unclear. Disagreement was modeled as power, survival, or attention. Children learn not only to speak but to defend, contest, and assert in ways that feel necessary to be seen or safe. Others experience emotional neglect, inconsistency, or unpredictable validation. When approval is uncertain, expressing disagreement becomes a strategy for being noticed, taken seriously, or asserting presence. Every word becomes a measure of identity, every argument a tool for recognition. The mind learns early that challenge is both armor and signal. Attachment patterns shape resistance. Those who experience inconsistent care may develop hyper-vigilance, anticipating criticism, contradiction, or dismissal. They learn to protect ideas, values, and feelings with precision. Conversational disagreement is internalized as a defensive necessity, a rehearsal for potential relational instability. Parental modeling plays a subtle yet profound role. Children observing frequent arguments, rigid convictions, or intolerance of differing perspectives may internalize these patterns as normal. Conflict is learned as a default mode, a primary method of interaction. The energy of disagreement becomes familiar, habitual, and intertwined with identity. Environmental reinforcement strengthens these habits. Peers, teachers, or social settings that reward assertiveness or winning in discourse amplify tendencies. When argument is met with attention, compliance, or submission, it becomes positively reinforced. The child learns that persistence in disagreement carries outcomes, both social and emotional, that feel necessary or desirable. Unresolved trauma or unmet emotional needs can also underlie resistance. Fear of rejection, shame, or invalidation often manifests as oppositional energy. Arguing becomes not just an intellectual exercise, but an emotional shield protecting self-esteem, boundaries, and inner equilibrium. Defensiveness and argumentation are survival mechanisms, sometimes honed over years of experience. Cognitive rigidity often develops alongside emotional defense. Certainty becomes comfort, argument becomes familiar terrain. The individual may cling to principles, beliefs, or interpretations as stabilizing anchors. Deviation or contradiction threatens not only perspective, but the psychological structure they have cultivated to navigate uncertainty. Yet these roots are complex, intertwined with resilience and intelligence. The ability to contest perceived nuance and engage analytically is often remarkable. Argument is both shield and lens, protective in one sense, clarifying in another. It reflects a mind attuned to inconsistency, alert to challenge, and ready to engage the world with vigilance. Understanding these origins is not judgment, it is context. The habitual energy of argument is informed by experience, adaptation, and necessity. Early environment, attachment patterns, and personal history shape the architecture of resistance, insight, and relational tension that defines their interactions. In the roots of resistance, we see the beginning of a life lived in alertness, negotiation, and defense, a life that perceives disagreement not merely as friction, but as a structure through which identity, presence, and security are maintained. The mind of someone who constantly argues is alert, analytical, and precise, sometimes to a fault. Every word, pause, and gesture is scrutinized. Statements are rarely taken at face value, meaning is dissected, compared to prior knowledge, and weighed for consistency or error. Disagreement is often triggered not by malice, but by perception, an instinct to correct, clarify, or contest what seems incomplete or inaccurate. Cognitive biases play a significant role. Confirmation bias magnifies information that supports their perspective, while discounting opposing evidence. Attribution bias can interpret neutral or ambiguous statements as criticism, challenge, or threat. The mental lens is sharpened for difference, amplifying contrasts that might pass unnoticed by others. Interpretation is rapid, often instinctual. They connect threads of conversation, memory, and principle, sometimes anticipating argument before it arises. Small inconsistencies, tone, word choice, or phrasing trigger internal alarms that demand attention, often translating into verbal challenge. The brain becomes a finely tuned conflict detector, attentive to what is unsaid, implied, or potentially threatening. Reasoning habits reinforce the cycle. Arguments are constructed systematically. Premise, evidence, counterexample, repetition. Logic is applied rigorously, sometimes with little awareness of relational nuance. The desire for coherence and correctness drives persistence. Even when others disengage or withdraw, understanding another's perspective is secondary to validating their own framework, though empathy may exist beneath the surface. Attention is selective. They focus intensely on discrepancies, contradictions, or perceived injustice, often overlooking concordance or agreement. This attentional bias can make conversations feel contentious even when the subject is trivial. The mind prioritizes difference over harmony, assessment over acceptance, and analysis over listening. Memory interacts with cognition. Past conflicts, misunderstandings, or unresolved disputes are stored as reference points. Each interaction is filtered through accumulated experience, heightening vigilance and shaping anticipatory responses. Patterns of argument become self-reinforcing, embedded in both perception and reaction. Language itself becomes a tool and a shield. Precision, repetition, and correction are not only methods of communication, they are mechanisms of self-preservation. Speech structures identity, asserts competence, and delineates boundaries. Words are wielded with intent, consciously or unconsciously, to maintain clarity, control, and safety in relational space. Yet this cognitive architecture is double-edged. It enables insight, sharp reasoning, and perceptual acuity. It allows detection of inconsistency, protection of boundaries, and precise articulation of perspective. But it can also obstruct understanding, empathy, and relational ease. The mind tuned for conflict may overlook nuance, shared intent, or emotional subtext. In the architecture of the argumentative mind, we see the intertwining of perception, cognition, and survival. Thought patterns sharpen, bias reinforces, and attention hones, creating both brilliance and friction. Understanding is filtered through layers of experience, protection, and analysis, making disagreement persistent and comprehension elusive. Beneath the surface of constant argument lies a well of emotion, often unspoken and sometimes unrecognized even by the individual. Fear, shame, or past rejection shape responses, giving rise to patterns of defensiveness that are as habitual as they are protective. The need to assert, contest, or correct is often less about winning and more about safeguarding identity, autonomy, or self-worth. Insecurity is a frequent companion. Questions linger beneath every word. Am I understood? Am I respected? Will I be diminished? Argument functions as armor, a shield against the anxiety of uncertainty, misunderstanding, or perceived dismissal. The intensity of disagreement mirrors the intensity of these internal fears. Shame can be hidden but potent. Early criticism, invalidation, or relational trauma may create hypersensitivity to perceived judgment. Even minor contradiction triggers defensive energy, an instinctive effort to protect the self from exposure or inadequacy. In this way, argument becomes preemptive, a barrier against vulnerability. Emotional regulation is often challenging. The intensity of feeling can override patience or reflection, prompting immediate verbal response rather than measured engagement. Their emotional system, conditioned by past experience, prioritizes alertness and defense over empathy and understanding. Anger, frustration, or irritation surface as signals of deeper affective states: fear, hurt, or longing for recognition. Past relational wounds leave subtle imprints. Unresolved conflicts, childhood neglect, or repeated invalidation contribute to heightened sensitivity. They carry these experiences into adulthood, not as conscious thought, but as emotional habit. Each interaction is filtered through these histories, intensifying the spark of disagreement. Defensiveness is often mistaken for arrogance. In truth, it is protective, a strategy developed to navigate unpredictable environments. It shields emotional vulnerability, reinforces boundaries, and maintains control when trust is incomplete or inconsistent. Yet in social interaction, this defense can appear combative, unyielding, or even alienating. Empathy exists beneath the armor, often latent. Those who argue persistently may feel deeply, intuitively sensing tension or distress in others. But emotional awareness is filtered through self-protection, making comprehension and attunement intermittent or delayed. The ability to truly understand another's experience is sometimes subordinated to the imperative of self-preservation. Despite these defenses, resilience emerges. Emotional vigilance and protective strategies have allowed the individual to navigate complex, sometimes hostile, relational landscapes. They survive criticism, manage tension, and assert their perspective in ways that would overwhelm others less conditioned by defense. Their emotional armor is both shield and skill, honed over time, imperfect but effective. Emotional defenses, like cognitive patterns, create both friction and insight. They shape perception, response, and relational presence. They are born from experience, fear, and survival, yet they carry the potential for awareness, growth, and eventual transformation. The challenge is not to erase them, but to understand their origin, function, and subtle impact on the world around them. To live alongside someone who always argues is to navigate a landscape of friction. Family dinners, workplace discussions, or casual social exchanges can become subtle battlegrounds. Words are carefully chosen, silence is scrutinized, and every statement carries potential weight. Those around them often learn to anticipate conflict, adjust speech, or retreat to avoid escalation. Friendships are shaped by this dynamic. Some friends grow distant, wary of constant debate. Others adapt, learning to negotiate, redirect, or tolerate. Connections may survive, but the effort required often exceeds what casual interaction allows. Loyalty and patience are tested repeatedly. Romantic relationships carry unique challenges. Arguments may arise over trivialities, amplified by underlying emotional defenses. Partnered communication requires delicate balance, assertion without alienation, honesty without triggering defensiveness. Attachment styles shaped by early life and reinforced by habitual argumentation influence trust, intimacy, and negotiation. Love becomes a terrain of both passion and careful management. Professional relationships are equally affected. Colleagues may perceive argumentative individuals as combative, critical, or uncompromising. Yet the same vigilance and analytical precision that fuels dispute also enhances problem-solving, attention to detail, and critical thinking. The relational ripples extend far. Tension, awareness, and adaptation radiate outward from each interaction. Social adaptation is constant. Those who interact with argumentative individuals learn patterns of engagement, timing, phrasing, and the subtle cues that may de-escalate or ignite tension. The environment itself becomes a moderator of behavior, shaping both the individual and those around them. The energy of argument thus influences social ecosystems, not merely individual exchanges. Emotional wariness is common. Friends, family, and colleagues may experience frustration, distance, or subtle resentment over time. Yet the argumentative person may feel misunderstood, unappreciated, or isolated. Relational friction is a mirror, both reflecting internal patterns and projecting their impact outward. Despite the challenges, there is relational learning. Those who constantly argue often inspire careful listening, articulate reasoning, and heightened awareness in others. Conversations with them demand attention, reflection, and mindfulness, skills cultivated in response to friction. Conflict shapes relational intelligence for both parties, even if uneasily. These relational ripples highlight the duality of argumentative behavior. It creates tension and strain, yet also sharpens awareness, fosters adaptation, and can deepen understanding when tempered with patience. Relationships with these individuals are exercises in empathy, negotiation, and resilience, requiring engagement at levels many never experience. Ultimately, persistent argument leaves a mark on both the individual and their social world. It shapes patterns of interaction, emotional endurance, and relational expectation. The ripple effect of constant disagreement extends far beyond the immediate exchange, influencing perception, behavior, and connection across the landscape of human interaction. Even the most persistent disputants have moments of pause. A glance at a partner's fatigue, a friend's withdrawal, or a colleague's frustration can pierce habitual patterns. These moments may be brief, fleeting, or startling in their clarity, revealing the repetitive cycles of argument and resistance. Awareness often begins with reflection. They notice the energy expended, the isolation created, and the subtle cost of relentless assertion. The mind begins to consider not only correctness but consequence, not only principle but relational impact. Observation replaces reaction, even momentarily. Empathy may awaken slowly. In recognizing the feelings of others, exasperation, hurt, or detachment, they glimpse the relational shadows of their behavior. Understanding that disagreement affects more than themselves opens space for subtle adjustment. Even a small shift in listening, tone, or pause can create ripples of change. Insight is sometimes prompted externally. Feedback, confrontation, or unintended consequences illuminate patterns previously obscured by habit. They may realize that argument serves less as dialogue and more as defense, that insisting on being right often distances rather than connects. Recognition can spark curiosity about why disagreement feels necessary and how it shapes relationships. Moments of self-awareness are rarely perfect. Old habits resurface, defensiveness still flares. Yet the very capacity to notice, reflect, and question is a form of growth, a crack in the armor where understanding can emerge. The mind, trained for conflict, begins to consider alternatives to habitual opposition. Reflection can extend to emotional regulation. Awareness of triggers, the words, tones, or situations that ignite argument, allows the individual to pause, breathe, or respond differently. Cognition and emotion begin to cooperate rather than compete, creating room for thoughtful engagement instead of automatic resistance. Awareness does not guarantee change, but it lays the foundation. Recognition of patterns, understanding of impact, and insight into emotional drivers become tools for choice. They can begin to navigate difference without reflexive friction, to listen without preparing immediate counter, and to engage without the compulsion to dominate dialogue. In these moments, possibility emerges. The argumentative individual glimpses a path beyond habitual conflict, a way to preserve intellect, integrity, and vigilance while cultivating relational harmony. Understanding becomes both a mirror and a bridge, reflecting internal dynamics and connecting them to the experience of others. The potential for awareness is subtle, quiet, and profoundly human. It requires patience, self-compassion, and curiosity about one's own mind. Even small steps toward recognition of habitual argumentation represent growth, resilience, and the capacity to transform friction into insight. There is a quiet complexity in those who always argue. They move through life with vigilance, precision, and an intensity that can exhaust and illuminate at once. Every disagreement, every insistence, is a signal of inner architecture, defense, perception, habit, and the accumulated weight of experience. Understanding them requires patience. Their argumentative energy is not arbitrary, it is an expression of mind and emotion finely tuned to detect inconsistency, anticipate threat, and preserve selfhood. To see beyond the friction is to witness intelligence, sensitivity, and awareness shaped under the pressures of past experience. Yet within this intensity, there is tension, connections may fray, laughter may feel strained, and moments of miscommunication echo longer than they should. The world they inhabit is both alert and lonely, sharpened by insight but sometimes dulled in emotional reciprocity. The spark of argument illuminates as much as it isolates. Empathy becomes the bridge. To recognize the fear, insecurity, or learned vigilance beneath the surface is to glimpse the human truth behind persistent disagreement. They are not merely difficult, they are navigating a landscape shaped by habit, survival, and the drive for presence. Their resistance is both armor and message, frustration and plea, assertion and reflection. Possibility exists in awareness. Even small shifts, pausing, listening, or reframing, can transform friction into dialogue. The mind, trained for contention, can learn attunement. The heart, trained for defense, can practice patience. Understanding is a slow unfolding, a quiet negotiation between vigilance and empathy. Their journey is deeply human. They teach lessons about perception, resilience, and the subtle interplay of cognition and emotion. In observing them, we recognize our own patterns, the limits of certainty, and the challenges of connection. Every argument carries both shadow and insight, frustration and learning, friction and potential. Ultimately, quiet understanding is not about eliminating disagreement. It is about noticing, observing, and appreciating the layers beneath habit that masks fear, intelligence, and emotional vigilance. It is about holding space for complexity and recognizing that human behavior, even when difficult, is always multidimensional. The people who always argue remind us of our own fragility, our defensive reflexes, and our capacity for growth. They show that insight often comes wrapped in conflict, and that empathy is born not in agreement, but in curiosity, reflection, and patience. To witness their spark without judgment is to acknowledge the subtle interplay of mind, emotion, and experience that shapes every human story. And in this recognition, a quiet possibility emerges. Not every argument must end in understanding, but every person can be seen with compassion, every mind can be honored, and every heart can be glimpsed in its intricate, luminous complexity.